A Gallup poll earlier this year found only about a third of Americans are happy with the way democracy is working in this country. Meanwhile, other surveys found between 30 to 41% of Americans were open to some form of authoritarianism. And President Trump himself has suggested Americans might like a dictator. Against this backdrop, KPBS's Amita Sharma spoke to two San Diego men about what it's like to live in an autocracy, and she joins us now. Welcome, Amita.
Oh, it's good to be with you, John.
Good to see you here. We typically think of people living under dictatorships as having no rights, as powerless to choose their own leaders, no civil liberties like freedom of speech, religion, or equality, but it is actually more than that, right?
It is more than that. I interviewed a man who wanted to be anonymous because of his job. He's a local university professor. He grew up in Saudi Arabia. When he moved there as a kid, the government confiscated their passports, so they could not go to and from the country without notifying the government first, and the government's hospitality could be revoked at any time. Later, he moved to the Soviet Union before it fell apart in 1991, and what he really homed in there was the lack of alternatives to political leadership. So if you were unhappy with the politicians that you had, there was no real viable option or opposition to replace them, which you can say of current day Russia as well. And this professor also said that people there had to reconcile within themselves what they knew to be true and the government's version of the truth, which dictated how they behaved in public just to get through their daily lives. I spoke about this with San Diego Mesa College political scientist Carl Luna, who said that what the professor described is a typical trade-off that you find in autocracies, and that trade-off is obedience for protection.
As long as you played by the rules of the system you were under, didn't push, didn't ask questions, you'd be left alone to a degree. But anybody could be thrown under the bus by anybody else if they had to rat somebody else out to the state. Authoritarian states leave you poor, leave you without choice, and leave you with a shorter lifespan on average.
A second man I spoke with grew up in Iran. He works at a local university and also did not want his name used for fear of retaliation. He said in Iran, people are reluctant to call the police to report a crime because it is fraught. At any time, the situation could flip and you could be interrogated as a wrongdoer. Iran is a theocracy. He said people there lead double lives if they don't agree with the government. Those people have to pretend to be religious and pretend to share the beliefs of their government in school or in front of anyone who they don't know or trust. If they don't want to fast during the month of Ramadan, they have to sneak around to eat. And then they, for the most part, can be themselves in the privacy of their homes in front of family and friends. Luna says living this kind of duality takes a psychological toll and clashes with basic human questions.
What is my identity? Who am I? Is the fundamental question we all have to answer. And authoritarian states demand that no matter what, you must be loyal to the state, ignore what your eyes see, and simply do what they say. But that means when you're on your own, you've got to deal with these realities. It makes one schizophrenic, stressed out. One of our biggest freedoms is the freedom to not care what the state thinks, to simply do what we want.
Meanwhile, America's status as a democracy is wobbly. UC San Diego political scientist Barbara Walter says the United States is in a high-risk zone of partial democracy, partial autocracy, also known as anocracy.
Since Donald Trump has come back to the White House, our democracy has declined faster than it ever has in America's history. And everybody would agree that we are no longer in the same category as a healthy democracy like Denmark or Canada or Australia. We are in this middle zone no matter how you measure our health.
And John, I do want to mention that the United States is not the only country that is struggling with democracy. A report by Democracy Without Borders earlier this year found that for the first time in 20 years, the number of autocracies is greater than the number of democracies around the world, and that the proportion of people living in democracies is at its lowest in 50 years.
My goodness. Well, depressing, but very important to know. Thanks so much, Amita.
Thank you.
This story is part of our Public Matters initiative. You can learn more about it on our website at kpbs.org/publicmatters.